Hi, I'm Miss Sarah, and this is At Home Makerspace, where every week I show you how to make fun projects with things you can find at home. Our projects this summer are all inspired by our library's summer reading theme, Imagine Your Story, which is all about fantasy and fairy tales and imagination. Now, this week's project is inspired by a famous Greek myth, the myth of the three fates. Now, according to this myth, there are three goddesses who spin, measure, and cut the threads of life. Now, my Percy Jackson fans may remember this scene in The Lightning Thief, where Percy and his friend Grover see three women knitting with some electric blue yarn, and Grover is convinced they are the three fates. So to honor that myth, this week our projects will be to make something with yarn. First, I'm going to show you how to make tassels. Now, I'm going to show you this project using yarn, but you can actually make tassels with lots of different kinds of string, like embroidery floss, which is the string you use to make friendship bracelets. To make this project, you'll need some yarn, a ruler, scissors, and something to wrap your yarn around, like a book or a pack of index cards. Start by cutting two pieces of yarn that are 12 inches long. Lay one to the side and hang on to the other one. Now we're going to get our index cards, or whatever you're planning to wrap around, and lay one of those pieces of yarn across the top. Start your yarn so the cut end is on the opposite side from where you have that 12-inch piece of yarn. Then begin to wrap. I wrapped about 10 times. When you're done wrapping, cut the yarn on the side that's opposite your 12-inch piece. Now we're going to take that 12-inch piece and double knot it around the yarn that we wrapped. Now turn it over and cut the yarn on the other side. Now we have something that looks like this. Next, I am going to be making the loop which our tassel will hang from. Go ahead and find those 12-inch pieces and trim them if they're not even. Then tie a small knot. Next, take your other piece of 12-inch yarn and lay it on your table. Lay your tassel on top. You'll want to tie a knot around your tassel a little ways from the top. Next, take one end and begin to wrap it around your knot a couple of times. Take the other end and wrap it in the opposite direction. This is important because if you don't wrap them in opposite directions, the knot you tie next will not hold. I'm going to go ahead and tie it in a double knot. That way it's extra secure. The last thing I'm going to do is to trim my tassel so the ends are all even. And there's our finished tassel. Once you have completed your tassel, you can string them together to make a garland. You can turn them into a piece of jewelry like earrings or a pendant necklace, or you can add them to a homemade bookmark. I'll include a link to our bookmark Makerspace if you'd like to learn more. Next, I'll show you how to make pom-poms of various sizes. We'll start with a big pom-pom. To make a big pom-pom, you'll need some yarn, 2 toilet paper tubes, and scissors. Start by placing the end of your yarn between your 2 toilet paper tubes. Now begin to wrap the yarn around the 2 tubes. I went ahead and wrapped about 40 times. The more times you wrap, the denser your final pom-pom will be. You can also create a denser pom-pom by using thicker yarn. Once it's wrapped, go ahead and cut the yarn. Now cut another piece of yarn that's about a foot long. Insert that yarn between the 2 toilet paper tubes and tie a loose knot just to hold things in place. Now we're going to slide our yarn off of our toilet paper tubes. keeping that 12-inch piece of yarn in the middle. Now we can tie a nice tight knot. You're almost making a bow tie shape. I like to tie a knot on one side, then flip it over and tie a double knot. Now we are going to cut all of the loops. If your scissors aren't particularly sharp, you might need to cut a few loops at a time rather than big chunks. Make sure you cut the loops on both sides. Once that's done, fluff out your pom-pom a bit. And if there are any long pieces, go ahead and trim those up. And here's our finished pom-pom. Next, I'll show you how to make a small pom-pom. This small size also works well with embroidery floss. To make a small pom-pom, you'll need yarn, scissors, and a fork. Start by wrapping your yarn around your fork. I wrapped mine about 20 times. Once again, the more you wrap, the denser it will be. Trim the yarn when you're finished, then cut an extra length of yarn. Mine is about 9 inches. Thread that 9-inch piece through the middle of your fork, then tie a knot to hold it in place. Tie it pretty tight. I'm doing a double knot, then sliding it off of my fork. It should again resemble a bow tie. Now go ahead and trim those loops. Because of the small size, it might be harder to cut, so again, just cut a few loops at a time rather than trying to cut big chunks. Repeat this step on both sides. When you're all done, fluff it out or roll it in your hands to round out your pom-pom and trim off any long pieces. I find that the smaller I make my pom-poms, the more trimming I have to do to make it round. And there is our finished pom-pom. Here's a handy way to make a medium-sized pom-pom. For this project, you'll need some yarn, scissors, and a hand to wrap your yarn around. Start by pre-cutting a 12-inch piece of yarn. We're pre-cutting because once we start to wrap that yarn around our hands, it'll be a little harder to work the scissors. I wrapped the yarn around my hand about 30 times. When you're done wrapping, go ahead and grab your scissors and trim. Next, insert that piece of yarn between your middle and ring fingers. Bring it around and tie a loose knot to hold it in place. We'll go ahead and slide the bundle off of our hand, finish tying the knot, flip it over, and tie a nice tight double knot on the other side. As before, we're going to go ahead and trim all of those loops. When you're done with that, go ahead and fluff out or roll your pom-pom, and then trim any of those long pieces. And here is our finished pom-pom. Finally, here's how to make a pom-pom any size you'd like. You'll need yarn, scissors, and a piece of cardboard. You might also want a ruler and a pen or pencil. We'll start by making a custom pom-pom maker with a piece of cardboard. Your pom-pom maker should be as wide as you would like your final pom-pom to be. I decided to make mine 2 inches, so I am making a 2-inch square. You can make yours as big or small as you'd like, but if you make the width smaller than 2 inches, I would still recommend making the height at least 2 inches tall. Go ahead and cut that out, and then we are going to be adding a notch to the middle. The notch should be wide enough to easily thread some yarn through, and about 2/3 the length of your pom-pom maker. Cut that out as well. Now it's complete, and we can begin to make our pom-pom. Once again, we are going to wrap our yarn around our pom-pom maker. I wrapped mine about 30 times. When you're done wrapping, trim your yarn, then cut an extra length of yarn. Mine is about 12 inches long. Now thread that yarn through your notch, bring it around, and tie a loose knot to hold it in place. Go ahead and slide it off, tighten up your knot, flip it over, and tie a double knot. You guys know how we do this. Now it's time to cut those loops. Now go ahead and fluff out your pom-pom, give it a roll, and trim any long pieces. Here's our finished pom-pom. As you can see here, the size of your pom-pom will be the same as the width of the thing that you wrapped it around. So choose your pom-pom maker according to the size you would like your finished pom-pom. Once you have completed your pom-poms, there are all sorts of things you can do with them. You can string them together to make a garland. This is especially fun if you have lots of different colors. You can add it to a winter hat. You can turn them into cute pom-pom creatures. You can use them as projectiles for a pom-pom launcher. I'll include a link to our launcher Makerspace. And finally, my favorite, you can make a bunch of them and have an indoor snowball fight with your family. My final project for you today is an easy weaving project using straws. For this project, you'll need yarn, at least 3 straws, scissors, tape, and possibly a toothpick. You'll start by taping your straws together at the top. Line the straws up so that there is a small gap between all of them. I'm using 3 straws, but you could use more if you like. Use thicker straws if you'd like to make this project with thicker yarn. And here is our finished loom. Next, we're going to grab some yarn and begin to weave. Slide your yarn between your first and second straws, leaving a tail a few inches long. Then I'm going to bring the yarn between the second and third straws. My yarn goes under the first straw, over the second, and under the third. Now bring it around the third straw to make a loop, under the second straw, and over the first straw. Now we're going to repeat this pattern. Remember to alternate between over and under. Don't worry if this takes a little practice to get the hang of. Remember to slide your work towards the top of your loom. Continue weaving until you've reached the desired length. Now we're going to cut some long pieces of yarn that will thread through the straws. I recommend making them 2 or 3 times the length of your straw. Take one piece of yarn and begin to thread it through one of your straws. Remember that the thicker your straws and the thinner your yarn, the easier this part will be. Go ahead and thread it until you can see the yarn coming out of the bottom. Pull the end so your straws are now in the middle of your yarn. If you have trouble getting your yarn through your straw, use something long and thin like a toothpick to help push it through. Next, we're going to tie the loose ends. You should have 4 loose strings on each side, 3 that came through the straws and 1 that you were weaving with. Knot 2 of these strings together, then knot the other 2 strings together. You should now have 2 knotted bundles of yarn. Go ahead and knot those 2 bundles together. When it's secure, it's time to start slowly sliding our work off of our straw loom. Try to keep this yarn about as tight as it was on your loom. Keep working until you can pull your straws all the way out. Now go ahead and tighten up your work. And then we're going to tie our loose strings the same way we did on the other side. Go ahead and tie 2 strings together, then tie the other 2 strings together. When you're done, tie those 2 bundles of string together. When you're all done, it's time to trim the long ends. And now we have our finished piece of straw weaving. Once you have completed your weaving project, you can use it as a bookmark or tie it around your wrist to create a woven cuff. And that's how you make 3 simple projects with yarn. Now remember, there are lots of other kinds of projects that you can make with yarn. So whether you make one that I showed you today or something else, I'm really excited to see what projects you choose to make. Remember to take a picture or a video of your project and share it with us at the library. You can do so through our Facebook at www.facebook.com/FHCPL, through our Instagram. Our handle is at FHCPL, or you can send us an email. Our email address is makerspace@finleylibrary.org. Hope you guys had fun working on that project this week, and I will see you again next week for a new project. Bye!